The animal you're looking at is a raptor. Now, that is a general classification. It also is an owl. I'm sitting here with Dr. Gary Duke and Dr. Pat Rettig, the University of Minnesota, and this is part of a program called the Rapture Research and Rehabilitation Program. Pat, first of all, what is a raptor? R-A-P-T-O-R is the spelling. What is it?
That's right. Well, first of all, I try to correct a misconception we run across quite frequently. A lot of people hear the word raptor and they think it's rapture or T-U-R-E, so I'm glad to spell it for us. Bill and scored that away. Raptor is a general term that applies or is applied to the eagles, the hawks, the owls, the falcons, and vultures, and the caracara. And it's just a broad spectrum term that can be applied to this group as a whole.
The first raptor we were just looking at is an owl. What type of owl is it?
That bird is we call a barred owl, and it's one of the most common owls that we have in this part of the state, in this part of the United States.
Before I talk to Gary about why we should save them, we'll probably from time to time be hearing from the fellow who is behind you. An eagle, what type of eagle?
All right, this is an immature bald eagle. That was probably its bird of the year. Was hatched out last spring and has kind of an interesting history in that it was hatched and banded in a nest in Colorado and was found in Illinois about 2 weeks ago with a broken wing.
Dr. Gary Duke, Rapture Research and Rehabilitation Project. Both elements, research and rehabilitation of injured birds, both very important to your program, aren't they?
Yes. I guess we feel that the research in the long run is more important. We can repair a few birds and get them back in the air, but at the same time as we're doing that, we're learning about diseases and we're learning about the normal function of these birds so that in the long run we can use that information perhaps in the management and certainly applied to more rehabilitation work. The significance really is not the repair of single individuals, except perhaps in the case of peregrines and eagles, which are endangered. But more significantly is what I've just mentioned, the research we're doing. And then, of course, we have to work on a lot of birds, whether they're endangered or not, in order to maintain our expertise. You can't just work on a few a year and still rank with the Mayo Hospital for expertise.
Now, the hawks, eagles, owls have kind of, I guess along with the reptiles, have kind of had a bad image over the years. They haven't had proper PR, perhaps. It is important that we save them, however, isn't it? They're very, very important to our continued existence on this earth.
I guess we would have to say that anything is probably important. We don't really know what significance it might have, but these particular animals, we do know how significant they are. This barred owl behind us, for example, would probably eat 4 or 5 mice a day during the winter time, and of course 4 or 5 mice could eat quite a bit of a farmer's grain. Probably one of the reasons that they've gotten the bad reputation is that over the years they've competed with man for the things that man wants to eat, like pheasants and other animals of that sort. And so they've gained that reputation as a competitor. The bald eagle usually eats dead things, but that's a significant thing as well. We have to have something to clean up some of the carcasses that would otherwise produce diseases and so forth in the woods.
The animal, Pat, right behind you, that you described as a bald eagle just a few moments ago is not what we think of when we see the emblem of the United States with the bald eagle on it. The one below it, perhaps if you move just toward me a moment, we could see the one below it, which is a more mature bald eagle, and which is what we think of when we think of that term, bald eagle. You can see the white head and white shoulders and so forth. That one, too, is not yet ready to go into the wild. Okay, now you can move back over here, Pat. These animals certainly are majestic, but when they come to you, they frequently don't look majestic at all, do they?
Well, but when birds come to us, they've literally been run through the ringer for the most part. This is kind of the first aid station on a battlefield, in that almost probably 90% of the birds that we receive here are suffering from some sort of traumatic injury, one way or another. And this includes projectile injuries from shotguns and rifles. It includes trap injuries. A large number of birds that we receive here have been hit by cars. As Dr. Duke indicated, many birds of prey they're scavengers. They're perfectly happy to feed on carrion. And of course, anybody driving down the road notices the large number of dead squirrels, rabbits, raccoons, and so on that you find on the road at any given time. And in the fall of the year, particularly when the birds are migrating in large numbers, they are not at all hesitant to come down and feed on these carcasses, and a lot of them do get hit by cars. That's probably the largest single category of injuries that we have. And then there's a miscellaneous category which includes flying into windows, power lines, the ground, trees, you name it, and they'll hit it and break a wing. And then we do occasionally, I suppose, like I said, the other 10% would be naturally occurring diseases that birds are brought in for.
Now, you do medical procedures very familiar to us as human beings, because many of the medical procedures you do, although adapted to the birds, are similar to what we see. For instance, x-rays. We see x-rays all over here, and they're fascinating to look at, but that's one of the first things you would do, I would imagine, when a bird comes in.
Yes, when a bird is received here, we do a complete physical and diagnostic workup on it to determine not only what is probably the most obvious injury, which may be a broken wing, but also the presence of any ongoing disease processes that may be developing as a result of the stress of trauma. And so we start out with a physical examination and proceed there from a radiograph to determine the extent of the injuries and any other incidental injuries that the bird may have sustained. And then we do take blood samples and analyze them for blood chemistries and routine hematology. We'll take bacterial, microbiological material for culture and to determine if there's any pathogens that are causing disease in the bird at the same time. So really, it's veterinary medicine. It's medicine that's applied specifically to treatment of the individual bird. And in that respect, we use techniques that are just, what you'd see on medical center, I guess.
It's interesting, the x-rays and the set bones and things of that nature. But the program we saw today was fascinating for another reason. Gary, why don't you introduce the young lady who did the procedure, first of all? She is in the school here, I understand.
Yes,
right?
this is Kathy Dantzler. She has worked for us for about 2 years and is now a freshman veterinary student, meaning I think she has about 3.5 years of college and is starting now in the veterinary program. And we're kind of excited about getting veterinary students into the program because hopefully they'll maintain their interest in birds after they've graduated and can contribute to this kind of a thing at some other institution, perhaps.
Now, strictly speaking, this is not a surgical procedure, right, Pat?
Oh, that's right. What we're doing here is repairing some damaged feathers that were on this bird when it came here for treatment. We don't know what caused the damage, but the result was the fact that the barbules have all been stripped off the shafts of the feathers so that they don't stick together and they don't provide an airfoil at all. And so what we're doing is we're cutting off the old feather and literally gluing on a replacement feather that has been taken off of another eagle that died.
Those of us who have kept birds are familiar with the concept of molting. Will these replacement feathers also remove themselves naturally in a certain period of time?
Sure. When the bird molts out next spring, these feathers will fall out in normal sequence like they would normally. We've just cut the feather off outside the level of the skin. We've not actually touched the feather where it's located, where it's attached to the feather follicle itself. So when the bird molts next spring, they'll all fall out and be replaced with brand new feathers.
Mm-hmm. It's remarkable to see these birds as they go through that whole procedure of recovery, and you have them here in various states of recovery. How long does it normally take before they are able to go back into the wild, if that indeed is the possibility?
Well, it would probably take a minimum of about 4 weeks if we have a fracture, and it kind of depends on the fracture, of course. 4 to 8 weeks for most of the fractures, and then again, depending on the extent of the damage, they have to be reconditioned before they can be released. Just like a person with a cast on his arm doesn't, for example, Fran Tarkington will have to exercise a bit before he'll be back to his prime once he's recovered from his fracture, and the same thing is true here. We have to take the birds out and exercise them and to ensure that they're really going to be ready to go out and survive, because it's a pretty vigorous lifestyle that they lead, having to capture their own food and things.
I'm sure that the whole procedure and returning birds to the wild and so forth, the research program is part of the satisfaction you gain from working here. But really the momentary level of excitement that must accompany the release of a bird must carry with it all kinds of not only satisfaction, but certainly up feelings about what's taking place, doesn't it, Pat?
Well, I think the reason that Dr. Duke and I are involved in this in the first place is that we have just a very deep, innate love for these birds, and I think both of us are thrilled just to no end to see one of them flying. A wild bird flying normally is a thrill, but when we see one that has come to us that's really been torn to pieces, and we can fix it up and turn it loose and know that it's going to go out and survive and continue to reproduce and contribute to the wild populations, hey, you bet it's a tremendous feeling of elation.
Certainly, in addition to the research, the fact that you can convince some people that these animals are worthwhile has to be another one of your goals, and certainly one of the things that pleases you when it occurs.
Yeah, definitely. One of our objectives is education, public education of the value of these birds in one sense, but also then teaching students here, both veterinary students and other students, about the medical aspects and the potential for the application of medical aspects to management. One of the best examples we have is that Minnesota raises about 24 million turkeys, and each of those turkeys is vaccinated for 2 or 3 things when they're a day old. If there must be some value in that vaccination, or they wouldn't handle 24 million birds individually. And we say, you know, each of the eagles, just about all of the eagles that are born in Minnesota are banded while they're in the nest, and if they could be vaccinated at the same time for something that would help us to maintain more eagles, it would really be a useful management tool, and we hope that that's where our research will lead us at some point.
Pat, I know you have just become a pilot. Is to attempt to share in some of the feeling of your charges?
Well, I don't know. I've always wanted to fly, and I guess when you've got an engine pounding away in front of you, it isn't quite the same as an eagle soaring, but to a certain extent, I like the feeling that you get when you're in the air, and it's kind of a similarity there.
Well, it's perhaps as close as we can come to the feelings that these folks experience all the time. It's the Rapture Research and Rehabilitation Program at the University of Minnesota. Very ambitious program, all kinds of dreams, many of them being realized. Gentlemen, thank you very much for talking to us today.